moving forward, I'll definitely never make this same mistake on a car ever again. I recently installed a Holley Dominator ECU in my personal car, and there's a handful of mistakes that I made. So in this video, we're gonna cover the mistakes that I made so that hopefully you can avoid being a dumbass like me. So I actually haven't even driven this thing yet. It starts and it runs, and I've pulled it in and out of the shop, but I need to run to the store, so I figured it's a good time to take it on its first drive, and with any luck, it'll catch on fire, do something cool. It's not tuned yet. I just have just kind of a generic file in there, so we'll see what happens. But the first mistake that I made on this car in particular, as you can kind of see, is there's absolutely zero room for literally anything. Is I 110%, if I had to do this again, I would have taken the engine out. The amount of time that I wasted trying to squeeze your hands in places and, you know, bruising your arms and cutting and bleeding everywhere and everything else, it just would have ultimately taken far less time to just take the engine out. I considered doing that at the beginning, and looking back, that would have been the right choice. So depending on kind of what platform you're working with, if things are tight and cramped, as much as it sucks, I think just taking the engine out, it can potentially be the right move. I couldn't possibly hate this air intake setup anymore, and I just haven't had the time to remake that yet. So at this point, I think I'm just gonna put it on the dyno, tune it, make the videos I need to make with it naturally aspirated, and then just turbocharge it. So at this point, I might just wait on getting her into that intake and turn it into an intercooler pipe instead. So probably one of the things that I'm the happiest that I did was I debated whether I should put the Pro Dash in the, you know, the traditional sort of gauge cluster spot or not. But instead I put it in the center console. And one, I think it looks really nice down there. And two, given this just like a car you cruise around, it's not a race car or anything like that. So I actually kind of like the simplicity of not having the Pro Dash, you know, front and center. So you can just kind of glance down whenever you need to see. Actually drives pretty smooth for not having any type of a tune in it. It's like it's adding about 6% fuel right now. Curious how loud the exhaust is going to be for the camera. It's a little louder than I would like it to be. I think hopefully a couple of turbos will quiet it down a little bit, but it's not obnoxious. Forgot the gearing in this thing's crazy. You're fifth gear going 30 miles an hour. So the next thing that I would consider a mistake, that I'm sure everybody kind of struggles with this one a little bit, and for me it wasn't really much of an option, but I'll just mention it anyways, because if you can avoid it, the easiest thing to do is to mount literally every single sensor and bracket and solenoid and anything that's going to go into the car. Mount everything before you even begin trying to wire it. My thought process on this one was to attempt to keep kind of the engine harness by itself, and then like a secondary harness for everything else. But then it turned out I started adding things, and everything still unplugs, but if I had to do it in a perfect world, everything would be mounted. I could just do all the wiring all at one time, and at that point you know where everything is, you know everything that you're going to need, and just like becomes like one big singular project. So as of now, I can kind of already tell I'm going to mount something here and then run wires to it, and mount something there and run wires to it, and it just kind of ends up sort of being a little bit of a mess doing it that way. So again, if you can help it, mount anything and everything that you think's ever going to go into the car, even if you don't necessarily need it right now, and then you can just have, you know, like one accessory harness that goes to everything. That's my preferred way of doing it, but again, just didn't have the time or even know what this car is really going to end up with. So unfortunately couldn't do that this go around. All right, we are definitely in the hood right now, so hopefully I make it out of here alive, and if I'm lucky, the car will still be here when I get back. That sounds nice. Bought like 3 things and it was almost $100. It's a crazy world we live in nowadays. Tap water in the shop is legitimately poisonous. If you drink that, you'll die immediately.
What year?
99.
Okay, nice.
Appreciate it. The guy asked me for money on the way out. This place is, you don't come here at nighttime. So the next thing that I would do different, which kind of goes in line with the last 2 things, is I would do all of the wiring outside of the car. So again, kind of like I said, I'd mount everything, measure everything, and then just build one big accessory harness for all of the different devices, rather than having like, you know, one branch of a loom going one way and then you wire something else and now you got 2 branches, then 3 and 4 and 1800. So with all that being said, when and if I ever pull the motor out of this, I will kind of de-loom everything that is there. And well, I say this as if I wouldn't just redo all of it, but in a perfect world, I pull it all out and at least kind of like loom everything together. So that way you just, I'd keep it as like one engine harness and then one accessory harness, but then you would just have like 2 kind of big branches, so to speak. I would just clean everything up a lot. But again, kind of wasn't able to do that as I had no idea what I'm even putting in this car. So kind of poor planning on my part results in maybe something that you're not quite proud of, or you know you could do better. It's always such a balance between doing things the way that you want to do them, you know that you should do them, and then the amount of time that you have available. And with that being said about the time, as much as it kind of pains me to say this one, I would say that the next mistake that I made is if I could go back and redo all of this, I would have just paid somebody to install it. With how many different things I have going on right now, and then trying to work on this for an hour here and an hour there, and 2 weeks goes by, so you forget where you left off, and it just, I got too much going on right now. So if I could have just dropped this thing off, wrote a check, and picked it up ready to go, that would have ultimately ended up saving me money. So yeah, there's an element of like the fun part to me of building a car is actually doing the work and doing it. But I don't know, sometimes life just gets in the way and it's easier just to kind of pass it off and let somebody else handle it. Especially, you know, like that's what, if you take it to a wiring guy, that's what they do. So they're going to be able to do it 10 times nicer and 10 times faster than what you're going to be able to do it. It's like 1500 degrees in here, and I'm such a moron, I forgot that this damn thing has air conditioning. Let's turn the AC on, it's a little bit more enjoyable now. Even in 5th gear at 30 miles an hour, this thing's pretty peppy. Makes plenty of power. It doesn't really need any more, but I don't know. Cars without turbos just kind of bore me, so that's next on the to-do list. Which is kind of funny because I just finished saying I didn't have time to wire it, but I want to add a turbo kit. But I have built probably 1,000 more turbo kits than wiring cars, so a little bit more efficient at that. However, it's been a while, so I'm definitely going to be pretty rusty when it comes time to do all that to this. All right, made it back without it catching on fire. I almost caught on fire. I'm sweating to death, but so I guess our first drive was a success. Looks like coolant temp's good, fuel pressure's good, 14.1 volts, plenty of oil pressure. Awesome. All right, dropped all my junk off. I'm going to drive around a little bit more just to make sure. Friday, so if it catches on fire, then I don't have to deal with it over the weekend. I can just write it off as a loss. It's actually way peppier down low than it was before. Kind of curious if it's just the throttle mapping thing. The other thing that's really nice is before this thing at kind of in between 0 and 1% throttle, it would do like one of these deals and buck like crazy. There's no speed sensor input to the ECU that was in it, the factory ECU that was in it. So it was kind of trying to kick idle control off and on. So now that's gone away. If I cared enough, I could have just went in HP tuners and changed that, but I knew I was going to be ripping all that stuff out, so I just kind of left it as is. So the next mistake that I made, I actually had full intentions of doing this and I knew better, but again, you just get to working and mounting stuff and next thing you know, it's in the car. But if I was smart, I would have programmed the Pro Dash and made custom layouts and screens and made it all nice and pretty and fancy before actually installing it in the car. So now that it's in the car, unless I rip it all out again, which I really don't feel like doing, I'm gonna have to do all of that stuff sitting in the car with a mouse sitting on my lap like a dipshit. So I definitely really wish that there was some laptop-based software for the Pro Dashes to be able to change stuff like that, but it is what it is. I knew better, but if you have the time, definitely program that stuff before you put it in the car. It's just way easier to do it, you know, sitting at your kitchen table or whatever, rather than doing it while you're in the car. Even though this thing's not tuned yet, it drives like $1 million. Suspension's still terrible on this though. I don't remember what suspension is on this, but it's like, feels like it's made for like a 92 Honda Civic. So I'll probably swap that out for something a little bit nicer down the road. I've been driving for half an hour or so, just figured I'd pull over and make sure all the fluids were still inside the motor, not on the outside. So the next mistake that I made is there is absolutely no way to run like a bulkhead firewall, circular connector, whatever you want to call it. So I didn't put much thought into that, you know, where it actually passes through the firewall. Like you can't even get to that at all. So what I wish I would have done is, even though you couldn't use it in the traditional firewall pass-through kind of fashion, if I had to do this again, I would have made a, you know, like a bracket or used some sheet metal or made some sort of a way to actually incorporate a bulkhead into all of this. One for the engine harness and then a second one for basically everything else. Because as of right now, this does have a HCR harness on it, so the injectors unplug, the coils unplug, a handful of other things unplug. But at the end of the day, there's still going to be some stuff on the motor that, in order to pull the motor out, it's all going to have to be unplugged individually. And everything's labeled, and it's not really a huge ordeal. It's just that getting your hands anywhere that they need to go can be pretty brutal. So again, if and when the motor comes out of that, I'll probably plan on going ahead and adding some sort of a bulkhead connector or whatever dumbass name. I'll shut up. I'm leaving. So I put about 25 miles on this without it exploding so far. And I don't know, probably got another 5-10 miles till I get back to the shop. I'll call it good for the day. And then once we get there, we'll go over my biggest regret with all of the install on this. And it was a little bit of an eye-opener. Moving forward, I'll definitely never make this same mistake on a car ever again. Now I totally see the importance of this. All right, made it back alive, so that's good. I think got some stuff on Monday, but on Tuesday, that car's going on the dyno. I don't care what tries to stop me. Long overdue on that. So drove around great. I didn't do any like full throttle stuff, but drove like $1 million, so pretty happy with that. But anyways, Absolutely, without a question, the biggest mistake I made on this, and I actually debated at first and decided I probably just didn't need it, is I really, really regret not putting a PDM in the car. So at first I figured there wasn't really going to be a whole lot of stuff, getting any type of power or grounds or any big stuff like that. So I was like, if I need to put 2 or 3 like fused items in this, then there's no sense in spending all the money on a PDM. But then as I got installing things and everything was such a pain in the ass to route through the car, I was like, let me overdo it. And so now I have I might even have like 3 different power sources, and just, it's cluttered, it's crappy. I think like the ring terminal blocks and the fuse blocks and all of that stuff just kind of all over the place. Looks a little, I don't want to say ghetto, but it would be so much cleaner with a PDM. And I don't think I'll ever get to the point of like rewiring this whole thing, considering that I just finished getting it up and running and drove it for the first time today. But the next project that I do, and probably all projects moving forward from there, every one of them, I don't care how simple it is, and I don't care if it's a smaller PDM, but everything's getting a PDM from here on out. I don't ever want to have another car with like a ring terminals and fuse blocks and things like that ever again. So the PDMs can get a little bit pricey, and when you're not doing anything fancy with them, it might maybe feel like a little bit of a waste of money. But now that everything's in the car, whatever that would have cost, it would have been well worth it. So anyways, those are the things that I wish I would have done a little bit differently on this car. And really the big takeaway is you just need to plan 3 years ahead and do everything according to that, and not only what you're currently going to do, but everything that you're planning on doing in the future. This car is just a royal pain. You can't get your hands anywhere. There isn't really space to mount anything. You know, some cars you're like, okay, I'm gonna mount all my stuff over here, so you can kind of get your lengths kind of according to that. But on this, I still don't even know where I'm gonna mount half the stuff once I get to that point. Yeah, so that's my words of advice. So hopefully you guys can learn something from this, so you can have a cleaner install than me and potentially save yourself some headaches. And I've definitely learned that a lot of you guys think that for your Holley related stuff, you can kind of basically only order from Holley's website. So if you've made it this far, if you go down in the description, I'll put a link down there where you can click on that, and I'll give you some links to some other websites where you can buy some kind of cool, I don't know, let's call it like accessory stuff, where there's different sensors, different ways to mount things, different wiring components and things like that. And if you guys check that out and find anything that I'm missing, some cool sites that offer some unique stuff. It doesn't necessarily have to be Holley specific, but install specific, wiring specific. Yeah, drop a link in the comments, and I'd love to check it out. I'm always down to find new things. There's a lot of really cool wiring related stuff that's come out in the last few years, and it seems to be scattered all over the place. It's pretty difficult to get it all in one spot. So I'd love to see what kind of stuff you guys are using, but that's gonna do it for me. Again, hopefully you guys can learn from this, and I'll see you next time.